When you do something bigger than you, it's worth documenting. Today, I'm going to share a journey that Joe and I took about 7 years ago with our kids that was pretty incredible. You're watching American Roots. When we started this journey, we were like any other family. We had a 3-bedroom house with a garage. We lived in the corner lot with a big backyard, trampoline. I mean, what else could you ask for? Raising kids in the city, you're close to school, everything was good. You may have heard me say it before, but we lived for our vacations. Joe and I went to Vegas, took the kids to Disneyland. I mean, that's what we were striving for, a family that can take vacations together. We spent a lot of time investing into our kids, and that was through things like vacations, concerts, things you could do in the city. In 2013, I finished my associate's degree and I went to culinary school. It was there that I learned all about food, how important it is to know where you source it from, where you grow it. The culinary school I went to had a herb garden out back, and that was really my first exposure to growing things that you would eat. It really opened my eyes. It made me see food differently, and I started to care about it differently. I didn't want to just stop at learning the basics, and I was really intrigued by, sweet things. I found myself taking extra baking classes and really enjoying that whole process. It wasn't just learning about it, it was also learning how to plate it. Then it was time to graduate. We made it. Going to college as an adult was extremely challenging, but my family was extremely supportive, and here we were, ready to take on the next adventure. When I graduated, my dad had told me about a restaurant in Maine that was up for sale. It had been closed for some time, but it had 2 separate apartments that were right above the restaurant. I flew out and looked at it, and before we knew it, Joe and I were packing, selling everything, and moving our family to Maine to chase our dreams of owning a restaurant. We were determined we were going to ride the waves of life, and this is how we were going to do it. When we got there, it was the most beautiful place I'd ever seen. We were right along the coast in a small fishing town, and the city that it was closest to was about a population of 7,000 people. When we got there, we realized that the restaurant was in pretty rough repair. It needed a lot of work. There was a lot of damage to the decking. Windows needed to be repaired both downstairs and upstairs. It probably could have used a good pressure wash. And on the other hand, there was a lot of really awesome firsts. The neighbors behind us were lobster fishermen and a farmer with a rooster. I had never lived with a rooster, so I didn't know what I was getting into. With summer already in motion, we needed to get started. We started on a living space. We cleared out the upstairs, gutted it, did the best that we could, but there was so much trash. I don't even know how many loads we took to the dump, too many to count. The tenant that had lived in the apartment before was a heavy smoker and had screwed the windows shut so there was no airflow happening in there. We literally could see where the pictures were taken off the wall and the tobacco had stained the wall. I didn't know how I was going to get it off. In the past, tobacco has always seeped through latex paint, even if I've used a primer, so I was really apprehensive on what to do to get it to come off. And as you can see, I mean, it was just so bad. My brother gave me some stuff that he used to clean out the inside of the boat cabins, so it started to work and it took it right off. I was able to make huge gains, start actually getting it off of the walls, and then I could paint. We were trying really hard to save our budget for the restaurant, but still make it a decent living space, but there was a lot of work to do. Everywhere we turned, it just seemed like overwhelming amounts of work. But we did the best we could and used what we could, and we did it affordably. We moved on to the deck. That was our next order of business, the front deck where the customers would be coming in. And then we worked on the windows. Every window needed something. We had to scrape off the old paint before we could put new paint on. Not only was it a budget we were up against, but we were also challenged with time. We needed to get the restaurant open in time for the tourist season for summer. The very next thing we had to do was handle the deck out back. It was literally falling through, so we had to completely tear it down and start over. That was something Joe and I had never done, and that was probably one of his very first big building jobs. My dad had a lot of building experience. He'd been a contractor in the state of Maine for the last 50 years. So I really felt confident having his help, not knowing anything. And he kind of guided us through the steps of just getting the teardown done, what materials to buy, and how to get started rebuilding. Because that was the entrance to our house right there. Those were the two doors to the two apartments. Once we got building, the process started moving along fairly quickly. And before we knew it, we had stairs to get up and down and a deck. I was proud of Joe for taking on something that he'd never done before. I'm extremely scared of heights, so I was so grateful that he was up there, but it was dangerous. And he really did learn a lot about building code, how to put things together, and it was a beautiful day when we could enjoy our deck. Now, time to move to the inside of the restaurant. We needed to get busy. We had a dining room, a kitchen, we had a dish pit, we had a bar, we had all kinds of cleaning to do. It was just overwhelming. At this point, we were a couple weeks into the summer, and remember, time is ticking. Tourists are here, and now the town is talking. Who are these new people? What are they doing? And so we just felt so much pressure to get moving, and we needed to make money. By this point, our budget seemed like it was dwindling, and it was getting harder and harder to make our dollars stretch. A lot of times we were just thinking, what can we reuse, like metal tumblers for the bar? And that's where we got the idea to just pull everything out, start getting organized, see what we're dealing with, see what's behind all of the stuff. I didn't really even know where to start. And with everything we'd endured with the apartments and the decks, it was just already exhausting. And we needed to get all of this stuff out of the restaurant. That's where we started. We set up tables out back, and we just started taking everything out one room at a time until the entire restaurant had everything sitting out back. This also gave me a really good opportunity to clean everything, see what I wanted to keep, what I didn't want to keep, and then get rid of it or put it away. And this was just the beginning. With everything out, it was time to start cleaning. And I'm going to be honest, I had no idea what I was in for. This didn't look like it had ever been cleaned in the 25 years the restaurant had ever been opened. There was so much grease. I had to pull everything out and just start from the top and work my way down. It was probably some of the hardest work I've ever had to do was get off that much grease. And I think it was because I had no experience and I definitely wasn't using the right tools for the right job. I moved to the kitchen, started removing cabinets. This was bare wood that was being used for food prep, so all of this had to go, all of the shelves, all of the cabinets. And we took it down to the floor and to the wall. That way I didn't have to deal with any of the bare wood or all of the grease that had built up in between the shelves. I just didn't want to reuse any of that. I wanted to start fresh. On the floor, I ended up covering it with a garage floor paint. It was just too much to actually lay new underlayment under that, and so we just decided to cover it. And as if all of that wasn't enough, we make our way to the dish pit to find the dishwashers broken and falling through the floor. So, of course, that was our next order of business. right along with the prep fridge that we had in the kitchen. Yes, we had it, but it needed to be fixed. The next piece of equipment we needed to start working on were the Friolators. And there were, I think, three total, and one of them we needed to take to be fixed. They were really, really in bad repair. But we were able to salvage them. Joe and I worked really hard to get these things clean. We wanted to make sure we could try to use them. Joe and my dad went to a restaurant store in Portland to try to part together what we needed, and we were successful. We were able to reuse the equipment, get the building cleaned up. This was far cry from where we started. Um, we actually could tell that that was a copper gas line, and that there was a floor there. It was a lot of work. But in the end, it was really worth it because we got to see every single nook and cranny. We got to know that we had our hands there, that if it needed repair, it was repaired. If it needed to be cleaned, it was cleaned. We were well on our way to having a working restaurant. And we thought, hey, we did a really good job. Done with the oven. Not so fast. We learned about Ansel Systems, and the Ansel system that was on the restaurant was outdated by about 10 years. So the Ansel system is the fire safety system, and it is required. So especially when you're using a Friolator or a gas oven, we had to have it, and it was an unexpected expense. Once we moved into the dish room, we started realizing that it needed a lot more attention than just the dishwasher. So we had to clean the walls, we had to paint, we had to really address the fact that there wasn't even a mop sink back there, and that was something that was going to be required for licensing. So we started with the dishwasher, we got the floor reinforced, and we ended up putting up a dish rack. We put in a 3-base sink, and that way we could do dishes safely, and then the infamous mop sink. And that was a huge check off the to-do list. Now, I didn't take a whole lot of pictures of the basement because basements are usually creepy, and this one was. This was the hole for the sump pump. The walk-in was broken, and that was just not something we could afford to have fixed. So we used the storage space for our freezers and beer, and we just needed to keep everything as dry as possible. When we went down there, there was standing water and mold, so we had to get rid of that. And by this point, we're making good progress. I'm pretty sure we lined the kitchen with FRP, fiberglass reinforced plastic, and that made it so the walls could be wiped down. And I was able to start really lining everything where there was drywall. My dad finished the shelving and the serving window, and we started painting the out front. Now, this was oops paint that we paid $9 for. But we didn't account that we might need more than a gallon. So it turned into a little more than $9 because now we had to have a custom paint made. I also had to have a space built for the soda machine, and that was quite the fiasco because it was right behind where the door was. We figured it out, and it happened with a hand sink. And each step we were getting closer and closer to being ready to open. In the bar, we added a coat of paint. We tried to use most everything that was there. We put in a hand sink, a working hand sink. We got a wine glass rack. We reupholstered the seats for the bar. We used all the same barware, stemware, anything that was already there. That saved us tons of money. Flatware, plates, anything like that. And we just tried to decorate it and try to keep it very clean. I really, really liked the blue that we chose. It ended up working out really well. Not only was it used for the shutters, but we used it throughout the bar and the kitchen. I ended up painting the cabinet with it. I just thought it tied everything in really nice. It had a nice, clean look. I did one accent wall in the dining room with it. About a month into us opening, I had a neighbor approach us and ask if they could put artwork for sale on our wall. They were pieces that were done by painters that were well known within the nautical community, and I thought they fit well in the dining room, so it worked out well. I was really going for a relaxed, comfortable feel in there. I wanted it to be light and bright during the day and kind of relaxing dim at night. I think we accomplished that for sure. After all of the obstacles, all of the things we had to accomplish, everything on the to do list, we were finally in the place where we felt confident that it was time to open. So we hung our sign. We made sure that we had everything licensed. We were ready to go. Only thing I needed was a menu and customers. I decided I'd put out a new menu every week, and that way I could start to learn what the people liked. So I created the first menu and we started cooking. We opened in beginning of August and I had the best help in the kitchen I think that anyone could have had. Now I know Addie loves cooking, but I know that a lot of the kids' motivation was the fact that they got free food. How else was I going to convince them to work with me in the kitchen and in the dish pit on a Friday night when there wasn't any food involved? No, but seriously, I mean, of course I'm going to feed the kids, but the whole entire family had to come together to make this operation happen. There's Joe in the kitchen, prepping food, getting things ready. Joe and I were tasked with having every single hat in the restaurant to wear. And that can be very challenging when you're trying to focus on one specific thing, like plating up dinner. We all had to be flexible and we all had to take our turns doing whatever needed to be done. But hindsight is always 2020, and looking back on it, they were the best kitchen partners that I ever could have had. It's time for the menu tour. This was the bruschetta, and these were the plate of onion rings with homemade ranch. This was the crab cakes with three different sauces that went underneath it. That was so good. This was a cup of lobster chowder. And this was my chef salad. I really like serving long salads. That was kind of my thing, so you'll see it again. This is my BLT salad, again with my made from scratch ranch. And this is the lobster roll, again with hand dipped french fries. The French dip with homemade au jus. This is the BLT with ham battered french fries. And this is the caramel apple cheesecake for dessert. I know, right? My mouth is totally watering. We had a pretty successful opening and we all had to take on a lot of roles. As you can see, there I am in the dish pit, washing dishes in between cooking and prepping. But we did try to spend as much time as we could eating together, being a family together, and enjoying each other's company. We were blessed to be able to do it in such a beautiful place. As fall began to set in, business kind of went up and down. You'd have tourists coming and tourists leaving. Locals would come in, locals would leave, but it wasn't really anything you could start to count on, especially as we moved into the winter months. We got our first snow the beginning of November, and it just didn't stop. And of course, I didn't know any better because I'd never really seen snow. I was born and raised in Arizona. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I didn't know anything about propane. I didn't know anything about oil heaters or K1, kerosene. I knew nothing about that. I also didn't know anything about a lake effect storm or a nor'easter. I had no idea. And so that year, coincidentally, we had a couple of those and we got 94 inches throughout the year in snow. And it was just crazy cold. Of course, the kids embraced it. Joe embraced it. They started digging, but we were literally buried. We lost power for 4 days and 22 degrees in the restaurant. We ended up getting a K1 heater for upstairs, and then we had the propane tank that allowed us to use the Renai heater and the stove. All the snow just really started to take an effect on our business. Things started to really, really slow down. And all the while, it would just keep on snowing. You'd think it'd stop, and then you'd look over and it was literally up to the Lowe's sign. The icicles were like something out of a movie. They were crazy dangerous and pretty cool. Tyler built an igloo out of the snow, and it was pretty warm in there. We ended up taking the kids to a Christmas tree farm that year, and we picked out our own Christmas tree. We were able to cut it down. That was a pretty cool, memorable moment. I've never done anything like that. We don't have Christmas tree farms in Arizona. You have Christmas tree lots, and you pretty much go pick your tree like everybody else. This was a unique experience. And as the winter went on and we got more snow, people started not going anywhere. The snowbirds had left, and business just continued to decline. The beginning of the following year, we lost Joe's dad to cancer, and that was really hard on all of us. Joe needed to go to Ohio for the services, and the kids and I stayed back and ran the restaurant so Joe could go say goodbye to his dad. And with business slowing down, it just seemed like day after day we had very little to no customers. And by that spring, we had to let the business go. Do you remember in the beginning of the video when I said that the restaurant had been empty for a while? Well, apparently the building had gone to foreclosure, and we weren't aware of that when we signed the contract. There was nothing we could do, and we had to chalk it up as a lesson learned. And looking back, I'm really glad that we didn't give up the opportunity to at least try, to see what we were capable of, to accomplish our dreams. Looking back on it, I'm glad that we reached out in faith. I'm glad that we rode the waves of life. We wouldn't be where we are today without those experiences. So, thanks for listening to our story, and I hope this encourages you to chase your dream, no matter the outcome. Don't let fear drive you. Doing something is better than doing nothing. Until next time, be blessed. We'll see you soon.